Hello and welcome to episode 70 of the DX Mentor, a discussion with Tom, NY0 Victor. I'm Bill, AJB. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you like what you find, please subscribe, like, and share to always be notified about upcoming events. Another way to keep in touch and to see what we're up to is via the DX Mentor Facebook page. I will be posting about upcoming podcasts as well as other DX events, so please give us a follow. You can check the show notes for any of the information that we discussed today. Our guest today is, as I mentioned, Tom, NY0V, and Joe, WAGEX. Tom and Joe are experienced, passionate DXers, and the conversation should be lively and informative. Tom was first licensed at age 14 in 1967 from Champaign, Illinois. Through the years, he was licensed as WA9YZN, WB0OKQ, Golf Zero Whiskey Victor India, and finally NY0V. He currently is operating in Chatfield, Minnesota, which is in Fillmore County. His DXpeditions to date include T30 Charlie X-Ray X-Ray, which he did twice, T32 Charlie X-Ray X-Ray, and he operated in a multi-single contest operation as VP5S in the 2013 ARL DXCW contest. And we're going to hear about that because he was with a terrific team. In March of 2022, he also operated from Namibia as Victor 5 stroke NY0V. His hobby interests include chasing DX, contests, operating CW, and playing with antennas. Tom is also the stateside QSL manager for V51MA. With all of these accomplishments, not to mention where he is on the challenge and the DX Hunt and DXCC, you would think that we would spend considerable time with him to go over all of this. No, sir. Tom spent significant time in the South Pacific in 19,000 feet of water looking, well, we're going to let you tell him what he was looking for, and it's better to hear it from him. It is an absolutely fascinating story. So put your feet back, turn the volume up, get a good focus on your screen, and give us a listen. You're going to enjoy this one. Well, good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the DX Mentor podcast. I'm here tonight with Joe, WAGEX, and we are absolutely thrilled because, there are so many facets to ham radio, and our friend Eric Guth likes to talk about it as a three-ring circus, three tents with all these side tents. And tonight is a really fascinating discussion about a situation where a guy was given a technical challenge, him and his team, and being engineers at heart and ham radio by initiative, decided, let's take a look at this. And I think it's a fantastic story. So we're going to dive into that. And on top of that, our guest is NY0 Victor, Tom. And Tom's a great operator, and we're going to learn some things about that. And I didn't tell him this ahead of time, but I'd like to know something about your quote, one call challenge. You mentioned that in your podcast with Eric, and I thought, what a great concept. I'm going to start doing that right away. So we'll get into that. But Joe, first
Yeah.
of all, how you been? And tell us a little about yourself.
Well, been doing pretty good. We've had a lot of rain here in southern Ohio. But I got started when I was 14, 15 as an SWL, was SWL for many, many years and finally got my technician license. And when I got my tech license, the 6 meters was good. Worked into the Caribbean, got hooked on DX and sort of upgraded over the years and been on many, many D expeditions, some big, some small. Loved every minute of it, but I sort of had to retire from that. It's pretty hard work for an old man like me. So that's pretty much how I got started, Bill.
Well,
How
let
about
me
you,
ask.
Tom? How'd you
Let,
get started?
Yeah, boy, it's very similar, I'm sure, to a lot of us hams that, I started in electricity and electronics class and shop class when they used to have those. Remember those?
oh, yeah.
Like seventh grade. But I kind of got hooked on that, made a crystal receiver, and wow, this is like crazy. I can actually hear these AM stations with just a few parts. But then started to get the same way, short wave. Got a night kit star roamer and kit, of course, Allied night, and built that star roamer, got her going, and then I had to have an antenna. And I remember my dad did not want me to put an antenna outside, which is really funny as the story goes. But so I said, well, Dad, I could just put a piece of wire under the soffit around the house, that way. And so I did. And to me, Joe, like shortwave listening, I had it right above my bed at the headboard, and I would put the headphones on, and that light would be shining out. All the lights were off, had the headphones on, and I was listening to like, Radio Moscow, Radio Netherlands, HCJB, all those.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is magic. You talk about 6 meter magic band, but it was all magic to me. Like,
Yes.
how can something, how can this electromagnetic waves where you have like two, less than 2/10 of a microvolt, and here I am listening all the way around the world, and they're loud and clear. I
Yeah.
mean, isn't that It's just the physics of it was always fascinating to me, how
Yeah.
that happens. So I was kind of the same way. And I had actually an Elmer who lived about a block away. He had a 50-foot tower and a TA-33, I guess it was,
Yeah.
on there. And he invited me into his house, and went downstairs, and here's this Heathkit line. Remember the Apache and the Warrior and
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
the Mohawk. And I mean, it's just a huge, huge setup. And it's like, wow, wow, here I am 15 years old. And so he helped me get my novice license. There were classes in Champaign, Illinois. And 1967, I was licensed WN9YZN. And so I got a Heathkit Apache, and we pulled a tube out of it because it was only 75 watts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pulled a 6146 out of it, and then put a piece of twin lead going from a crystal socket up towards where the hatch is on the top, the cover. And I had started to get into DXing, as a novice. Another novice friend of mine had more resources than me. He was a grown man, but he was into DXing, and I had a whole bunch of crystals. I was spending all my lawn mowing money on buying crystals so I could, you know, so I can move around.
Sure.
So, and I was on 15 meters a lot. Sometimes I get up on the high end, and there would be like Canadians on voice and stuff, and I would call them in CW, and they'd come back in voice. We'd cross mode it. But yeah, it was a great time getting into amateur radio. But DXing was always kind of a big part of that, and a big part of that is like, wow, I can talk to these people around the world, and how does that work, and why does it work? The physics of it. Yeah, the gray
It really,
line.
it really, so three
Yes.
things just came to mind. One was my father had one of those Globe Kings. So it was a giant rack. It had three sections in it. And when he would be on the air, I'd go down the basement and he would turn the lights off because I loved watching the OA2 rectifier tubes, fire off when he was modulating. And that was so cool. The other thing that just occurred to me, and this is not to cast aspersions on any equipment vendor, but you talk about a Flex 6400, an ICOM 7300, an FTD, it just doesn't have the same hit as my Star Roamer, right? Or it just doesn't. It's kind of like, wow, this is so cool. And then the third thing that popped in my head was, do you remember when we used to get QSL cards from the little print shop? And that's
Yeah.
how you knew you upgraded before you even got your FCC ticket. You remember that? Somehow he would get those and send
Yeah.
those out. So,
Yes.
um, so when did you make the transition from, okay, this is fun and I'm chasing DX, all of a sudden you are a contester? And if I recall, you
Well,
like contesting quite a bit.
well, I'm not a huge contester. I do dabble in it. Not like the MWA in Minnesota here.
Yeah.
The MWA, those guys, they challenge each other to, 13 contests a year. you know, and it's like, I've got other things. My wife would not let me do that.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. There's,
Right.
you can another weekend, no. But so yeah, excuse me here.
And part of it has to do with
Yeah.
what else has to get done. So to block out 48 hours, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, when were
Yeah.
you going to cut the grass? Or when were you on Monday? Oh, it's supposed to rain Monday. So now we're into Wednesday. And
Yeah, it got to for me where like, okay, I'm gonna see if I can work all the zones, that kind of thing. And then I do work the Minnesota QSO party. because I'm the only ham that's really active on HF in Fillmore County. So
Oh, okay.
that
Oh,
makes it fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you've been to T30, T32,
Hmm.
VP5S, as well as V5. Um,
Hmm.
what do you recall about those? What was fun um,
All of them.
okay, all right. Well, that's good.
Isn't that right, Joe?
yes, sir. Every one of them.
They're all fun. But
I assume the CXX has something to do with Mr. Collins's station.
yes, yes. I was president of the Collins Amateur Radio Club for golly, 25 years.
Oh,
Choo choo, But yeah, we decided that when Rod and I were out in the Pacific, um, the first expedition in 2002 that we did, we were out in there on a ship and we had to get fuel. And the nearest gas station was 3 days away in
oh,
Tarawa.
gee.
Yeah, 3 days of sailing. So we went over to Tarawa and I started looking it up. We're going to stay in Tarawa, wow, T30. And so I looked up on the ARRL sites. If you're looking at a D expedition for any of the guys out there, you can go to the ARRL site of all these different uh, countries, entities, and you can look up who the contact is, point of contact. And you can also feel free to, email other guys that have already been there.
Okay.
And they're usually very, very helpful. So anyway, here we are on our way, steaming along, and so I found out the contact in Tarawa, West Kiribati, yeah, the Kiribati, and faxed him. Said, "Hey, we're going to be there." Faxed him our licenses, and when we pulled into the harbor there and hooked up, he was there. Small
Wow.
country, right? So uh, next thing though, to get a license, you had to have Australian money. Because this was unexpected, right? I mean, we were going to, oh, we're out of fuel, we got to go. So we went down. Here's this ATM sitting outside. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, well, let's try it. Put my bank card in. Yep, got my $50 Australian, and here it is. So he typed up the license, and we were only there 24 hours, but we worked, Rod Bloxham and I, they put us out on the dock. And, well, I got a tickle in my throat. Sorry.
That's all right.
Wow.
Excuse me. Should come off my mic. But my wife gave me this cold 2 weeks ago, so
Oh, gee.
That's
just
for
getting
the
over it.
that's for
Don't
the
want
two. That was for the 2 weeks you're on Tarawa.
Yeah.
yeah, for 1 week. Yeah. We were gone for 3 months,
Oh, okay.
but anyway, so they had to refuel the ship overnight. Rod and I, they put us out gave us a table and put us out on the dock there, and we had a bamboo pole, basically fiberglass, and a vertical dipole, and one for each band. And then we just threw the ground in the water,
Yeah.
salt water, and that's worth 10 dB there. I tell you, that is amazing. And we made like 750 contacts, something like that.
Wow. So
Hmm.
I have to ask this because this is having not done this myself. How bad were the mosquitoes and stuff?
Actually, not too bad. We're right on the dock. There's a breeze,
Okay.
but it always smells like fish, you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
uh, but we had a blast. We had a blast working huge amount of JAs overnight. But you know what was kind of fun to me that I remember? Uh, it got in the morning and things were kind of slowing up. How sometimes there's a lag where'd the propagation go?
Mhm.
And I was tuning around and I heard a W6 calling CQ. And I go, well, why not?
Yeah.
So I went ahead and called him, answering his CQ from T30 CXX. And he basically said to stand by, and we're on CW, and he turned his antenna west. And I thought, let's just give a guy a thrill.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, who gets answered by a T30 when you call
Right,
CQ,
right.
right?
Yeah,
And
calling CQ.
Yeah, yeah. So I go, what the heck? And it was a lot of fun doing that kind of thing. And I usually ran the CW mostly, and Rod we phone, and we switched off and on.
So what kind
But
of radios did you have there, Tom?
well, we just had 7000s, ICOM 7000,
Sure.
and I think we might have had the Mark II-G in 2002, and then the 7000 in uh, 2008. And so anyway,
Yeah.
2006, six. Because we went back again on the second expedition, we had a medical emergency on the ship. And so we had to go into Tarawa. The shipping company was saying, you got to get medical help. We had a medical doctor on board, and but that wasn't good enough. So we went to Tarawa again. I go, Rod, K0DAS, Rod, can you believe we're going to Tarawa again? Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
So off we go. And same thing, only this time we knew who the license person was and everything. We were ready. So as soon as we got off, I went down to his house and brought him a couple of little gifts from the ship. And he went and opened the office up and gave us a license so we could operate overnight. And the crew uh, took us out where the ship was out in the harbor this time, and so they brought the dinghy over, and we got set up there on the shore, so we were legal and went ahead and went at it again.
Yeah.
And again, I was running mostly CW. That's my favorite mode, and
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, Joe has told me, I don't remember which one it was, but he had a someone in the crew who had not told them that he was on a blood thinner gash himself. So this poor guy gets almost to the expedition site, and then you had to fly him out to somewhere else, right, Joe?
We were going to Swains.
Oh, Swains, yeah,
Yeah. Yep. And so in the middle of the night, Craig Thompson, K9CT,
right.
we were co-leaders, and they wake us up and they said some guy is hurt bad. So we get up. It was a German fella that was on board with us, and there was a piece of metal sticking out, and he come across and hit that with his foot. And on Coumadin that we were not aware of.
Yeah.
Arnie was our doctor at the time, N68C. So so Arnie had to lay him on a table, stitch him up, but I did not let him go ashore with us because I thought the last thing he needs to get into ocean water. So
Yeah, that
the
hurt.
crew, there was only like a 4-man, 5-man crew of this big ship. So we asked them to take him back to American Samoa, which they did, and he was in ICU, I think, for 4 or 5 days. Yeah,
Wow.
he lost a lot of blood. We didn't have any blood. Arnie didn't, but he sewed him up good. But yeah, so
So you
Yeah,
were
when
on
you're out on,
Swains. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
oh, it's just when you're out on these expeditions, you are remote and you've got to have everything self-contained with you, and contingencies against anything that might happen. And so, we had a doctor on board that was needed, that we had to go over for the medical emergency. And eventually they sent a medevac from Atlanta or somewhere, Alabama, out to Tarawa to
Wow.
ah,
get the, yeah.
yeah,
So it also got
Yeah.
pricey.
a little expensive. You
That's
bet.
what we
Yeah.
kind of talk about from podcast to podcast about, like I'm sitting in my basement, I'm trying to work swains on 30 meters and I don't get them and I'm all frustrated. I pound the table and I go storming upstairs and said, my God, what's wrong with those guys? And until you've been there, you don't realize the challenge and the risk that they have on the other end. And so I know recently
Yeah.
the Marian Islands, there weren't a lot, some people weren't happy with that. I was thrilled. I thought, here's one individual working and doing this and trying to do it for our benefit. So
Yeah.
um, it's just got to keep that in mind. But speaking of a
Yeah.
doctor, the other thing I wanted to find out about, I'm looking at my notes here, but you had a contest station at VP5S, and that sounded like the who's who of contesters. So can you tell us about that?
Well, Yeah. Well, that was a Scott Wright K0MD asked if I would come along on that one. It was a ARRL and we had K4IU and Fred, and then also AC0W Bill, who's our director here in Dakota Division, right?
Right.
And I just felt like, oh, I'm the kind of the odd, I'm the weak link kind of thing, I know I'll be on 160 and 80 at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And like I said, CW is good. I like it, and I held in there at we were usually running about 30 somewhere in there. And I think over that weekend we made close to 5,000 Qs in from Turks and Caicos.
You was
So
at Jody's house, Tom?
yes,
Yeah.
we're at Jody's QTH, and have beautiful salt water all around you. Again, that
Yeah.
other 10 dB. Yeah, you don't need an amplifier when you're over salt water. It's
So my
amazing
first
thing.
D expedition in 1990, I've been working 6 meters and got my extra license and all that. So I decided to get my feet wet. So six of us went to Turks and Caicos. And I mean, we played radio hard, 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 24/7. And all the roads were dirt roads, big old water puddles, and your car would go in them and how you think you never was going to get up out of the water puddle. Yeah. And I had been back there, I think a total of 4 times, and absolutely love that little island. If I had not been married, I always told everyone and told the crew,
Uh-oh.
I would have stayed there. I really like
Oh,
that island. Yeah. But since then, it's got, like everything, busier and more commercial. And back
yes,
then,
it
it was
has.
an island.
Uh,
Right.
Yeah.
Joe, I'd be careful to ask Janet if you could go back there. She might let you.
Yeah, she's been there with me before. Oh, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
when you were at Collins, you were president of the club, but did you not do some Collins restoration on aircraft radios and things like that, or what did you get involved in there?
Yeah, the club had a couple of projects, and one of them was the restoration of the B-29 Fifi. And with that, we decided that we would support putting the radio sets together for that aircraft, for the history of that aircraft. And so we had enough guys that had the expertise to on the Arc 5 command sets to get those things working, and but also the ART-13, which is very interesting because Jules Yoder, who worked on that, he was in the Berlin airlift working on ART-13s.
Wow.
So he just passed away, silent key now, about a year ago. So last year. But anyway, so he got that thing working. And I don't know, have you ever seen an ART-13
No.
tuned? Oh my gosh. Um, well, one of the innovations that Art Collins did was a electromechanical uh, tuning device. And all those knobs on the ART-13 along the bottom are just a big tuner. And what that did was that they could set up each frequency channel with those. And when you say go to B, it goes all by itself. It's all electromechanical and
Ah,
tune right away.
Wow.
So what that meant then, the Japanese couldn't follow them. They're out there in the B-29. They go, let's go to frequency, 12. And they were gone.
yeah.
And it was tuned and they could talk. So that's one of the reasons why we won the war.
Ah,
I
Save
did
guys'
find
lives.
I found an
interesting.
article on that I'll put in the show notes, but the tagline is it was the voice of thousands of Navy flyers. That's what it says.
Mm,
The AN stroke ART-13. So that is
yeah.
really cool. That is
Yeah.
really, really cool.
What's
So
fun is that when they got that going, Fifi was going to Oshkosh. So I knew they were going to go over, and one of the guys from Dallas was going to operate it. So I fired up my antenna in kilowatt, and when he was coming up, I figured about where he was and called him, and I worked B29 on CW.
That's cool.
That
Ah,
was fun.
That
yeah.
is fun. So do they activate it like during the big air show up there every year? Is it something we can actually listen for or
I don't know about that.
okay.
I haven't heard it lately. I
Okay.
don't know if they still run it or not. It had terrible ignition noise in that
You
aircraft.
mentioned that in the podcast that you were on earlier. That never occurred to me, but it had to be huge ignition noise.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder how.
The,
So my father was a radio man on a B-25 in Australia, and I never would have thought to ask him that. I wish I would have now. So
Yeah.
um, wow. So I want to go back for a minute before we go forward and start talking about more about Rockwell Collins. So you mentioned the one call challenge, and I know that
yeah.
was a few years ago. Did you recall what your conversation was?
Well, my one call challenge was just something I thought, I want to keep improving my radio skills. And especially since when you start going after the DX challenge, uh, that gets pretty hard after a while.
Yeah, it
Like,
does.
I mean, I don't think I'll ever get to 3,000, but I'm getting up there. But I wanted to get to be a better operator because I had to now get on 160 and 80 more than I would ever have gone on 160 and 80 if it wasn't for the challenge, you know. So, because it's hard, you have to get up early in the morning and, all that stuff. And, but be it as it may, and especially learning how to run your receivers. It's so critical there with the noise that you have on those bands and getting the antennas right and maybe a beverage or a loop antenna for receive and playing with the antennas, which is one thing I really like to do. And I just thought, well, one thing I'd really like to do is just improve my operating skills. And I thought, I'm going to challenge myself that every call I make will be a one call on the DX. And let me tell you that it's not easy to see how many you can get in a row. But I challenge the guys who are listening to this as a mentor, is that try it. See what happens to your operating skills, because you have to really listen. You have to listen to the DX, what they're saying, while they're instructing you. You have to listen in the pileup. You have to see how he's operating or she in the pileup. Are they jumping all over the place and random, or probably not? They're probably hitting some of the fringes and what have you. And so anyway, it started to make me listen better, to scout it out, do my homework before I ever call, because I wanted to get that first call.
Sure.
I wanted to get them.
Yeah.
So, and I get up there, and you know how it is. I mean, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But when you get a good run of, 10, 12 of them in a row, you're going, hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyway, it's just a one call challenge.
Okay.
Maybe we ought to do that more
I
for the
think so.
guys.
And I list so for several years I had a rig in the car. And when you have
Mm,
a vertical and 100 watts in a car, that's a challenge. I really got to
yeah.
appreciate these QRP guys. But I did find the more it was almost like the more I listened, the more I worked. Because and
Mm,
Joe taught me this, it's like just because the guy says, NY0V, if you're 3.5, propagation just isn't there yet. So you're wasting your time maybe when you could be going somewhere else. So it's not enough just to listen to the station. Who's he working? How loud are they? Are they giving honest reports sometimes, right? But you're right. Just the art of listening is just gone. In fact, Joe, you had a great story about the first time you worked James Brooks, right?
Yeah. So James Brooks, who's on 20 meters, he's on Scarborough Reef. We're at 14,200, 5 to 10 up or whatever it was. And I did not know Brooks at the time. Since then, I've been on a trip with him. And just all of a sudden, we're all calling Tom, and all of a sudden he said 258. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why did that guy say 258? So he immediately I went up to 14258, gave him one call, and worked Scarborough Reef. And then I get on FM on 146.58 and called a buddy of mine. And I says, go to 14258. And he did the same thing. And it was just amazing. But it's back to what Bill was talking about. And we've all said, listen, listen, listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah,
makes a difference.
that's a trick that Glenn Johnson does sometimes. W0GJ.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
only about an hour down the road here.
Sorry to
US
hear about that.
52.
We know
So
very
he'll
well.
do that once in a while, pile up. He'll go listening to here, and if you're not listening, you're not
Yeah.
there.
It is crazy when you listen to a pod. I keep Joe and I've talked a couple times. When P5 finally comes on, it may not be in my lifetime, but when it does, it's going to be an absolute madhouse.
Oh, my
And
God.
and it's going to be I'm sure, a forum on how not to do it. Unfortunately, I think that's what it's going to be, but whatever. I mean, maybe I should be more positive. So I know when you were at Rockwell, you got a phone call about a very interesting problem and project concerning a lost flyer. And
Yeah.
Joe and I talked ahead of time. I mean, we wanted to talk to you and get to know you better and your accomplishments, but this is also, I think, is just so cool. So if we can dive into that in whatever detail you can or will are willing to share, we're good with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a little background. It is this company that we have worked with now for 26, almost 26 years is Nauticos. It's not, and Nauticos, uh, their representative contacted what was then Rockwell International in 1998 and saying, "Do you have anybody that can look at Amelia Earhart's radio communications?" And yeah, we said, "Yeah, we look at those." And my vice president general manager called me up and says, "Okay, Tom, you can pull a team together on this, but you can use any of the company assets you can get a hold of, software, hardware, what have you. But it's all volunteer, no charge numbers. So it's on your own time, really, is what it was. So we signed these non-disclosure agreements with Nauticos, and we started in January of '99, and we're still working it. It's
Wow.
still working.
Really?
So they thought it would take could you look at her communications and see if she's going towards Howland Island, KH1, that's where her target was,
Yes.
or away from it, or any of that kind of stuff. And so I pulled the team together on that. And the first person I called was Rod Bloxham, K0DAS. And all the guys that I brought were part of the Collins Amateur Radio Club. Of course, none of them were amateurs. They were all professional engineers. In fact, two of the people that I brought on board were Rockwell International Engineers of the Year
Wow.
awardees. So Rod Bloxham is one of those. Another avionics system engineer, the corporate chief pilot, K0YLU, Don Grimm, the avionics systems guy, did the Beach Starship systems. I don't know if you remember that aircraft. But anyway, and he was a Rockwell International Engineer of the Year. But all these guys, WB9OMY, Roger, does NEC Pro. He does antenna modeling. Um, yeah, anyway, all these guys, Charlie Snodgrass, we brought him in, and he was a navigator, navigating with charts, with shooting the stars in C-130s flying from Christchurch, New Zealand to Antarctica. So we had other navigators, pilots, guys in the Quiet Birdman, if you know that group,
Yeah.
pilots, but aviators, system engineers, hardware engineers, software engineers that are all HF guys out of our HF group. And so as we did that, then Nauticos gave us background information. Some of that's the equipment on the Itasca, the ship that was stationed out there. Coast Guard got our Itasca, and the kind of radios they had, what have you. And the other was the ship's logs. And we don't have any recordings of Amelia's voice, but they were running the mills. Remember the typewriters, all caps?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, they were radio operators, and so we got these logs and gave the time, and it said what she was saying, what they were saying, what they were transmitting, and it gave it in Q signals, QSA, you know,
Yeah.
S1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So we could read them because they were CW ops. These guys were real radio operators. So it was no big deal. Like, you know how it is. If it was a public or a newspaper person or a journalist reading it, what's that mean?
Right, right.
But what they say, QSA S5, and that's as strong as it was back then. It wasn't S9. And, hey, yeah, wow, she was strong, loud and clear. So anyway, we started looking at it and got the team together, looked them over, looked at the problem, and Rod says, "Well, this can't be done." I go, "What do you mean it can't be done?" Well, excuse me, the data is too qualitative, right? What is S5, right? In dBs, right? He's a system engineer,
Yes.
so it's too qualitative. I go, "Well, is that it then? It can't be done, and you want me to just go back to Nauticus and tell them that it's impossible?" And they go, "No, wait a minute," that kind of thing. It's like, and I've seen this over and over. You get a team together at Collins and you're working a problem and you think it's unsolvable, like, oh, this is impossible. But you step back and you say, okay, we know it's impossible. Let's set that aside. If it were possible, how could it be done? What do we need? What data are we missing? What are they? Because it's not like we didn't know anything. We knew what kind of antenna she had on that aircraft. We knew the transmitter. We knew how much power it had or was supposedly had. And, the configuration of that. We knew what the Itasca had, what kind of transmitters they had, the power output, the antennas, the receiver. And so we said, okay, let's look at it from a system engineering viewpoint. And of course, you have a building blocks in system engineering. You put A and B together. A is working, B is working, put them together. Now does A and B work? And you just build up. And this problem we define as a signal to noise problem, right?
Interesting.
Signal to noise ratio. So, so we had to come up with ways of measuring and verifying all these different building blocks that got us to decibels for each of our transmissions, and come up with a way of defining distance that goes with those. So for instance, on this one, Roger Hatcher models in NEC Pro, the antenna. And we look at that and, we learn some things from that, right? By frequency and the pattern and what have you. And we go, well, how do we know it's right? you know? And so Rod happened to be going down to Pima Air Museum, Tucson, and W0LTL was one of the guys that was on the board there, and we got onto the L10A, put an antenna on it, and then measure the impedance of that antenna at the feed point. So there's a little more bit of data there. Didn't tell us the antenna pattern, but now we had the characteristic impedance. Then we had another engineer, Tim Keene, that used SPICE, and he was able to model the output of the Western Electric 13 transmitter. And we can change the loads and figure out how much power out are we getting out of that thing into that antenna. So once you have that, then you say, well, with the efficiency of that antenna, what's our ERP, right? What's the radiation pattern? What's the ERP? Well, we weren't satisfied with all that yet. So we found a tri-gear Beech 18 out at the Ankeny, Iowa airport, and it was 6 degrees above zero. We went out there and put an antenna between the vertical stabs up to the front, and we ran the wire down, put a transmitter on it, and then we set up a receive site. And the guys at the airport were great. I mean, they got toes, and then they just pulled us around in a circle at 360 degrees, and we could measure the signal strength off that antenna and the pattern off that antenna. So then we go, well, how's that line up with neck? And by golly, there's some differences there. So we go, okay, we're learning a little bit more about that. And then then of all things, we went down to the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum. I don't know if you've ever been there in Atchison, Kansas, but it's really great to go down there. And the Hangar Museum too, where they have an L10E there now on display. They call it Muriel. But anyway, so they have an aluminum 1/12 scale model of the Electra
Really?
L10E. We go, boy, I wonder if we could borrow that. And we had to sign our lives away to borrow that aircraft, and it's, like that big and 1/12. And we took it back and we put a little antenna on it. And she was running at 3105. So we scaled it up times 12 and we put a 36 megahertz transmitter in it.
All right.
And matched it. Well, then we go, well, how are we going to measure this? It's just a 1/12 scale model. Well, we went out to a pasture in Iowa and we made an antenna measuring field out there. I mean, we had it all wood frame and we had a platform and we put that aircraft in flying position up on the platform with the compass roads down below. And then we had wires like fences between that and a GPS receive site off of that because we didn't want reflections coming off the ground to that antenna. And we just sat there and every 5 degrees, we turned that aircraft around manually and we measured the signal strength off that 36 megahertz transmitter and measured the antenna pattern. And it was not too bad compared to the Beech 18 out at Ankeny Airport.
Really?
So, and it's all those kinds of things, the verification of the data. And for a ground wave, we had to get into what is the decrease at 3105 of a HF signal off an aircraft at 1,000 feet as versus distance, signal strength versus distance over salt water. Well, I said, well, how are we going to verify? We had a software program called GR-Wave, and so we plugged that in, and we said, well, how do we know that's accurate? Well, the company had a Cessna 206, and remember, my VPGM said you can use any company assets. So, and actually, one of the guys I worked with, the VP of engineering, Steve Newsma, I went into him with the charts showing what we were doing. And I said, Steve, your Cessna 206 is a test bed for avionics, and it needs to be flown, because it's not being flown enough, and airplanes need to be flown, right?
Yeah.
So, and they do.
Yeah.
And I wasn't lying. I mean, it just needs to be flown. And I go, we have, Barry Brown, K0YLU, our corporate pilot. He's willing to volunteer to fly that down at Melbourne, Florida. That's where the airplane was. And we would get it all ready to go. We need to put an antenna on it. So we made basically a trailing wire dipole to go out the bottom of it with a big lead. We called it the sausage. It was a bright flash orange filled with lead shot for that antenna. And Rod and I were in the aircraft, and then we had another crew on Cocoa Beach Pier with a receive site. And so we could measure signal strength versus distance on GPS, and we would transmit a 100-watt transmitter out of the aircraft on 31. We were actually on 3,500. We had to be in the because we're hams, and
Yeah.
so we can't transmit on 3105. But anyway, so and it was just amazing because here we are near Cape Canaveral, right? The Cape, and we're having to fly down, and you go past an Air Force base and a nuclear power plant and all this stuff, And boy, the ATC, there was a lot of traffic on ATC and a lot of clearances and making sure everybody knew what we were doing on that, so that it would go smoothly.
So
And Barry, hmm?
I imagine what I was sitting here thinking was you start out from a point where somebody says, yeah, I don't really think we can do this. So I'm
Yeah.
sure some guys are enthusiastic, but they're also skeptical and they're kind of looking at the unknown. And most of us are like, wow, what a big ball of yarn this is. But now, by the time you get to this point, right, with each of those steps, you guys have just got to be just, oh my God, we can do this, right? So the momentum is going. And now, are you
Yeah,
submitting reports to the VP all along, or is it just you stop in and
no,
let him know how it's going?
no, we didn't have to report to him at all on how that was going, and we just kept doing our thing and coming up with data. And Rod is our main, you know, mad scientist, and so he would write the reports. He's up to 30 reports now over 26 years. This I told me this is a PhD, you know.
Oh
He
yeah.
really ought to have it as a PhD.
So I think I interrupted you while you were at Cocoa Beach and you were doing the
Ah,
measurements. So I'm sorry.
mm. Well, anyway, we look at that data of uh, decrease in signal strength on 3505 over distance over salt water because we had to be at 1,000 feet over salt water, and she said she was at 1,000 feet. And we compared it to GR wave, and it was very close. So we
Wow.
said, hey, good. You know, we now know that software is verifiable and very good. And so with each report that we did, I mean, we had to get the Navy's quasi minimum noise for that part of the Pacific Ocean, and so you have signal and noise, and what are the noise levels? The hard part for us was what's the noise level of a 1930s uh, Coast Guard, cutter. I mean, they didn't have all the radars and things like we had in 1936, 37. But on the other hand, maybe it wasn't as quiet, who knows what they didn't maybe know as much. Well, so we kind of had to, uh, put some swag in it there at that point of
Sure.
what is we have one thing about, you know, atmospheric noise, but then there's man-made noise. So you build up from the absolute noise level up with the noise, and you have the signal off the antenna, and you go down from the signal, and there you have the distance for each. There we don't call them range rings, we call them range donuts. There's a binomial distribution for every signal strength that was across there, and you get into things like hearing. Like, how do you hear? And if you're a CW op and you're listening to a signal that's barely audible, you know when you can copy it
Right.
solid, right? I mean, it's not solid and okay, now it is, and
Right.
all the different signal strengths that you have. But so the human ear gets involved here on how do you hear? Because we found that it's a lot easier to hear a signal coming out of the noise than to have a pretty strong signal going to a very strong signal. Okay.
Yeah.
So like for us today, S8 versus S9, and you're listening to a CW and it go,
Right. Flip a
right.
coin, right?
So your ear hears more logarithmically, and so it was an interesting thing that we had to go through there. But it was all when at the end everybody was focused, say, yeah, we can do this. These are the boxes that need to be filled, and we got to get that data because we don't have that data. And so and we got into the Miami archives of Pan American Airlines, and we got the training man. I got the nav manual here for Pan American Clipper fleets that Fred Noonan was the chief navigator. And how did he navigate? And how were they finding the islands across there? And how much did they use DF? And how did Fred note it in his logs and all that kind of stuff? So we had to get into Fred Noonan on how he navigated for range. What would he do when he's approaching Howland Island and asking for a bearing and he doesn't get it? Then what do you do? And then we take those scenarios and we went to the quiet birdman, all these old pilots, And we go, okay, for her flight, then we go, okay, here's your flight situation. Okay, what would you do in that situation? What's your decision? We see what they all say. And then you go, okay, now she's later in the flight. Okay, here's what's happened in the flight. You don't have that information. Now what do you do? And go on and on. So it was very interesting to see because because we had to make a decision tree on what decisions they were making in that aircraft. And since you don't know, there's a probability associated with every decision tree branch in your decision tree, and they take you different places in where you're going to search.
Right.
Because the whole point of our doing this for Nauticos is that that ocean is a big freaking ocean, right, Joe? You've been
Yeah,
out there.
buddy.
Yeah, it's a big ocean, man.
Yeah.
And so we had to have enough information and reasonableness that we can narrow that search area down where it was financially feasible to do it. Now, it's still millions of dollars, but it's not the whole ocean, right?
Right, right.
She was making decisions. They were flying it towards Howland. The signal strength is getting louder and louder and louder. Her last three transmissions were S5, as loud as they could be. So, that all that information comes together to say, okay, here's where a reasonable area would be. Now, it's still a big area,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's what we've been doing for 25 years is trying to, how do we keep narrowing this down? What more information do we need? So we got this idea that on each individual piece of equipment of her receivers and transmitters and what have you, there's probabilities associated. There's statistic variability, and for each piece of this problem. So what we said is, if we could put the whole system together and test it as one system, we could narrow the probability, statistical variability amongst the mean down on all this.
Okay.
And that started another series of, okay, where do you find a CGR32 receiver from 1936? And we need one, or an AR60. It was an RCA receiver that Itasca had. Well, at first we couldn't find any, but we had a guy, NY0V, Gary Bishop, did some sleuthing. We found one out at the Antique Wireless Association Museum in Canandaigua, New York. In fact, now we've been searching so much, we found 6 of these things around, and Rod has 2 of them now. I found one in Dayton.
Really?
Joe? Yeah, I was out in the flea market at Dayton, and I look around, and there's like, your antennas are up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's like, what?
So what?
And here's one. And the guy, he pretty well knew what he had there. It wasn't cheap, but we bought it.
Sure.
So, yeah, Rod bought it. But anyway, so he has 2 of them. And the guys kudos to the guys at Antique Wireless Association, because they got on board. They got their CGR32 working to spec. And so what we did then is we were able then to make all the measurements on that receiver. We actually took a software engineer, a gal, uh, Lisa Carrara. She imitated the transmissions of Earhart's voice, because we didn't have that for the flight. They didn't have any recording of that. And what we did is then we had her record those, and then we recorded them in known decibel steps on there in volume, so that we would feed them into the receiver, and then on a DAC we would record her voice in known decibels, recorded that voice on known decibels. Now that's where we started getting quantitative data for her voice on what those dB levels are. So all this stuff comes together little by little. But we've got Elgin Long, who wrote the book Amelia Earhart Mystery Solved, who also was a ham, by the way, but he was a Flying Tiger pilot, 747. And actually he was in a PBY as a radio operator in World War II. He lied about his age. He was in there like 16 years old, flying in a PBY, getting shot at over in the Pacific. But anyway, so Elgin and his wife Marie did 40 years of research. He gave us an RA1 receiver. Well, that was awesome. And then over time, we found two loop antennas, like her DF loop on her airplane, and we hooked it up and got that working along. It was a Bendix uh, loop coupler and loop, and we could DF the NDBs out of Toronto at Rod's garage, on that thing. So and that comes into play later on. But anyway, so we found that we had the receiver, um, and then Rod, working with some guys, found a Western Electric 13C transmitter, her transmitter. And this thing is, man, it's a boat anchor. But anyway, so Rod is really the key guy in getting all this stuff together and making sure it works. The next thing is, well, what do you do now? Well, we found a company in Bridgewater, Virginia called Dynamic Aviation, and we went out and presented what we were doing, and they got all excited about it.
Oh,
And Carl Stoltzfus, the then chairman of the board and all, was real excited about it. They have a Beech 18. They named it Amelia, and they put the team on it. They integrated the antenna, and we're going, oh, I wonder if that's going to work on a Beech 18. And they put that antenna on. We went and measured the impedance of that, and it matched the L10A ones we did at Tucson, Pima, really, really, really close. So we're
wow.
going, okay, we're on the right track. So they helped us. We integrated all that equipment into racks with. So what we had then basically is the whole system end to end, because we found a ship, a 1925 Oyster Bay boat of all things, where we had to extend the mast up to make the sloper the same as the Itasca, and we were down in Barry Bulow, W0IY, and myself were down in the hold of that, running the transmitter side of this, and a CGR 32. So what we had then is this old equipment, but above that, we had modern SDR 95S1 Collins receivers and GPSs. So you have this test bed, but you have all this very modern SDRs and test equipment to measure that against. And we had a lot of politics to go through, let's say, of just paving the way to get permission to fly this out over the ocean. Well, we wanted to be as close to 3105 as possible, so I went and applied for a temporary authority from the FCC, and I got it granted. We had our own call letters, so we could match the Western Electric 13 transmitter in frequency, because
Yeah.
it was only set up for what Amelia had.
Yeah.
So, and we thought, oh, this is going to take forever. Government agency, and here's these three guys, going, yeah, we want to go out and transmit on what was now a military route frequency, and try to convince them, well, we're running a 50-watt AM transmitter, and you know, uh, and we aren't going to be transmitting very much. I mean, how do you present that to the FCC? And anyway, we made up a proposal we would do at Collins. We made a proposal. And so we had our bios in there that this isn't any floozy thing, all our backgrounds and what have you, and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And I got a call one day from the FCC. And this guy says, okay, now tell me what you're doing, right? And so we had a good talk, and he says, okay, um, let me go off and work this basically. And within a week we had our license.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, it was cool. I mean, people get excited about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool
Right.
stuff. And so anyway, and I think he was an older term. We got talking, and because by then I was retired and all that. So you get talking, you're kind of he knew that what we were doing, and okay, we're good guys. We're not crazy or anything. Crazy about radio, but not that crazy of bonkers.
Hmm.
So we got out there and we had to get a hold of, there's a lot of military off things going on off the coast of Virginia, right? And so we had to contact the military out there and let them know what we're doing. And we contacted all the people. We sent them what we were doing in the books, the book that Dave Jordan had written, The President of Nauticos, and all that stuff. And the day we go to do it, we're out there flying out east of Virginia off the Delmarva Peninsula in this Beech 18. And I'm in the boat, and Rod's in the plane. And the pilot and the co-pilot, by the way, was another radio operator, Brian McCoy, KE0YSQ. So he had the Dave Clarks on, and we're doing air to ground on 440, air to ground. And so as we're going along, we get a call from Giant Killer. That was their call sign, Giant Killer, from the military. And they go, November 18 Echo, who are you and what are you doing? Like that. Now we were in the channel. I mean, we were not in the military zone, but uh, so it took some explaining, to do what's going on. And so Rod looks out to the port, uh, out to the north, and here's this nuclear submarine going along the wake. So there's a nuclear submarine there, and that's why they were getting all upset. But we had
Oh,
cleared with like 5 different government agencies, what we were doing, and here this guy didn't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
But his name is Giant Killer, and you can look up Giant Killer in that call and what those guys do out there and controlling the traffic and what have you. But anyway, be it as it may, we went out there, measured signal strength versus distance over saltwater using the original equipment, measuring in tenths of a dB,
Wow.
and then that was one part of the problem. And then the other part was at 8 o'clock in the morning, she said, "You transmit, Itasca," and they're circling, and she's trying to get a bearing on them with her little DF antenna, which we said, well, why? And she says, I heard your transmissions, Itasca, but I couldn't get a minimum, meaning, the dip and now it's all audio. She had no S meters, This was all audio. She could
Uh,
not hear that minimum. Now, you got two big big egg beaters of engines, and you've
yeah.
been flying for 20 hours, right?
Wow.
In that airplane. But we tested it out also, and we had the computer screens and everything there. And then Rod, when we were doing the test flight first, he says, "Oh, I can see a minimum." I go, "Yeah, but she didn't have anything she could see." I go, "You can't use that computer when you're actually flying this test." And so the big question is, why couldn't she get a minimum?
Yeah.
What's going on there? And there, and that's one place I'm not allowed to tell you
Okay. That's
why,
Oh,
but but we figured it out. We figured out why she couldn't get a minimum and what was going on with that Bendix and what have you. So with that, we've got new data. We've been doing this for 26 years, and now we're at the point where Rod wrote up the report. It was 79 pages long, this report, and it says, here is where we go next. This is it.
oh,
Based on this new data, on narrowing this down, this is the highest probability. So I know your question is going to be, what do you do next? So we're in the point now where we're working with an ocean company that has AUVs. They're autonomous now. They're not towed array like the first 2 expeditions that we had. And the third one, we did have an AUV from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. These guys have multiple ones. So we feel that with multiple AUVs, we can clear this last high probability area for our next expedition.
wow.
So with that, we're pretty excited, but of course it's raising money, right?
Yeah.
That's always the bugaboo, I guess. You got to
yeah.
get people who are interested in the legacy of Earhart. Uh, the people who support these kinds of efforts of expeditions are not like looking at stock beta and equities and return on investment and all that. They're interested in finding Amelia Earhart.
Right.
Yeah.
They want her brought back. They want that aircraft brought back. It's part of the fabric and her risk taking, the risk taking of aviators back then, female, male, both. She was the second person to cross the Atlantic solo, 1932. Of course, a Minnesotan, Charles Lindbergh, was the first one. But those 5 year intervening years, five people lost their lives trying to do it. So it was not a sure thing even then when her little single engine Vega. But so she's part of that risk taking, breaking boundaries and frontiers and women getting into aviation. She was an adjunct professor at Purdue University. Uh, she's investing in the airlines that was starting up then, and Pan Am and all those. Excuse me. So people get interested in finding her
Yeah.
and want to be part of that legacy of making that happen.
So,
No doubt.
Tom, 2 nights ago, um, I sort of like this Amelia Earhart thing, and I watched Josh Gates, Expedition Unknown. He has this show, and he did some search on Hallam. And then 2 nights ago, I just turned on the Science Channel by accident, and here was this crew, and they ended up in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah. Yep.
And okay, and so how this all got started, there was a military, a New Zealand military detachment, and they were trying to get away from the Japs, and somehow they found this motor, and the guy wrote down on his map the motor number, and they said that that was Amelia's airplane. So then these guys went out with all the sophisticated sonar or whatever equipment and drones flying over the jungle because you can't look in the jungle and see anything. It's
Right.
you can't see 10 feet.
Right.
So, um, and I had to leave, but I'm pretty sure they didn't find anything. So, so does
Yeah,
any of that
really
make sense?
amazing.
Does any of that make sense to what you guys are doing?
Well,
Or should
there's several theories, as you probably know and have heard. One of them gets a lot more publicity. We're kind of the quiet group. Um, but think about that one. That's the Baku, Papua New Guinea site. Uh, there is what we call a PNR, a point of no return. If she flies past that, she isn't making it back.
Oh,
And
sure.
our data, and you can look at the logs and probably surmise that if she was S5 for her last hour of flight, is strong, loud, and clear, she wasn't flying back to Papua New Guinea, right? I mean, she had
Oh,
already been way past Nauru, which is about the halfway point,
yeah.
roughly. She was 10:30 at night. She was flying by Nauru and Charlie 20. But
Mm,
yeah, so we're not too excited, and we don't argue too much about like the Marshall Island one, right? And he had that picture, and AE went ahead with her story. 2 days later, 3 days later, someone found that same picture in a Japanese magazine or a book in a library,
oh,
and it was in
uh-huh.
1935. You know, I mean, it just totally just. And I'm sure if the TV company had done their homework, I mean, there was in 3 days. Within 3 days, they knew it was not uh, her in that 1937, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You can't
So
let facts get in the way of a headline though.
yeah, yeah. And then
So
you've
I
got the other group that says she kept on flying down to Gardner Island back
right.
then. which is now Nicamaruru. And, they find things there and, they publish it and say, oh, this could be Amelia Earhart's. They never say it is. There's no smoking gun there.
Right.
They say
Yeah.
maybe, but anyway, so when we were on T-32 in Eastern Kiribati for the it was the CQ Worldwide. We were Rod and I went and did a de-expedition there for CQ Worldwide in October contest, and so we went around that island and we started finding all sorts of things, and so we made a PowerPoint back to the team at Nauticos and saying, "Oh, we just found this underwear, and it must be Fred Noonan's, We have no other explanation for it being here,
Yes, it has to be.
So
It has to be, right?
I'll tell you what's weird though. After we exchanged emails a couple of weeks ago to kind of get a date, I'm a big Jeopardy fan, and there was a question on Jeopardy about freckle cream. And I
Yeah,
don't know if you've heard that or not. So
yeah,
and Amelia Earhart. So I instantly went out and Googled that. And there is, in fact, a story about a camp that was found. And they
right.
found like a turtle shell, and they found some bird, and they found some old clothes and a bottle of freckle cream, which I guess she didn't like her freckles and would use this stuff all the time. So they automatically assumed that
It
that
was
was her camp and that's her. But I
Right.
was surprised because I thought, well, maybe there's one story. So I Google it, and it's like, oh, okay, I can pick up 6 pages of people who now say that's got to be it. So uh,
Yeah.
it's interesting, though.
Except the jar is clear and freckle cream was real actually an opaque jar.
Oh, there you go.
But
See?
but that's not the whole thing. If you took high school debate, everyone knows that there's like 10 rules of debate. But one of the first rules is thou shalt not base your argument, the validity of your argument, based that your original premise is true, on the assumption your original premise is true. You can't prove it on an original assumption,
Right.
right? So what's their original assumption? Well, she couldn't find Howland Island, although she's heard them on the radio now at 8 o'clock. I'm just going to fly the line of position, which keeps on changing, by the way, over the sun moving. But I will fly that south, and there's more islands down there, regardless that it's 3 hours longer to get down there. And she's already said she was low on fuel, about a half an hour of fuel left.
OMG.
So, and then you got other higher probability of reasons why those things are there. World War II. You had a shipwreck on that island, the Norwich City. It was a British colony, you know. I mean, all these other regions have higher probabilities of items being on that island. We on Howland Island, they find stuff. Japanese fishermen get on that island and they're grilling out and defecating, and yet hams can't get on the island there from the U.S. and it's our island, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, things like that are going on
What,
all
what,
the time.
what I'm amazed at is everything you all took into account. You took into account this, and let's get the radio, and what kind of noise did it have, and how did they connect together? Did you consider her fatigue? Like she couldn't find a minimum, so could that have been part of it?
Well, fatigue's always a part of that problem because it was over 20 hours. I mean, I flew from LA to Sydney in a 15 and a half hour flight in business class and I was beat, you know.
Yeah.
But we got with the Air Force, who have done lots of studies on pilot fatigue. And the person we talked to there, the officer, she said that she had gray eyes and that after that kind of time, her visual acuity would go from about 25 miles down to less than 15 miles. So your visual acuity pulls in with that kind of fatigue. And then your decision making, what are you going to
Yes.
do?
Yeah.
Now, the other question is that, yeah, but when those engines start coughing and you're at 1,000 feet, you've got a minute to fly that airplane to the water, right? And so she says, wait, this is an hour after she said it was about a half an hour of fuel left was in one of the notes. And, all as a pilot, your number one job is to fly the airplane, right? So here you are, the engines cough, you've got to trim that thing out if it's not already in full trim because it's empty. And you've got to keep your kinetic energy up, keep it above stall speed for that last 1,000 feet. And then when you get just above water, you need to uh, pull up and pancake it down onto the ocean. And you don't practice those things,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So then we start, we got into well, how many other airplanes have L-10s and all have crashed in water? Well, by golly, we found one that uh, they had to land it on water. It was a passenger version, and they all got out, and it sank in 8 minutes. You know,
Wow.
the other one is there was a Beech 18, a C-45 at the Army had, and they were flying, and they had problems, and so the pilot had everybody bail out, and then he was the last to go, but it was on autopilot. It flew over Lake Ontario, and it just kind of went around, and then it landed in the water and sank, and they found it, and it wasn't in too bad a shape. The cowlings had come off. There was a hole above the wing root up in the fuselage, at the top of the fuselage. Propellers were bent, of course, but yeah, it was in pretty good shape. And that was with no pilot
Wow.
running out of gas.
So I
So
don't know.
Tom,
Go ahead.
did she crash at night or daylight?
No, it was daylight.
Oh,
It was
really?
daylight. Oh yeah. Yeah. See, now here's, Fred Noonan was a brilliant navigator. They left at 10 o'clock in the morning now to lay New Guinea. Guess what that is, GMT?
Okay, zero. All right.
0 hours GMT. So his elapsed time was the time, right? It was that was the GMT time.
Hmm.
And so as he's going along there, some people have said, well, he made he made an error because he crossed the date line and he used the wrong charts. That's one of the theories, and they discussed that last year at the Amelia Earhart Festival. And I go, there's Gary Lepuc, who's a navigator. He's just shaking his head and goes, "No way, right?" Because that GMT date had not changed, so he only had one chart, and he probably pre-calculated everything along that route. Everything was probably pre-calculated, and then you just make a measurement, and you know where you are, uh, how far off you are.
Wow.
So he was really a brilliant navigator uh, in what he was doing. He was the best at it. Now,
Yeah.
did he make a mistake? No one knows, right?
Yeah.
Right.
No one knows.
So I don't know if it was an article. I read several articles leading up to this because the more I got into it, that this is just cool. And to me personally, what's cool is you've named, I don't know, 30 people that have helped in this, and I'll bet 25 of them are hams. So that in itself is just really cool.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a story that she was close to an island, and the guy stepped out of the building he was in, and I think he expected to hear her engines because she was so loud on the radio. It's like
Yes.
there's no way she can't be close.
Right.
Did I hear that correctly? Or am I?
Yeah. Pretty much. That was Chief Radio Operator Bellerts, and he was interviewed by Elgin Long, and we have those transcripts. And he said at that point she was so loud that he looked out of the shack, you will in Hamlink, out of the radio room, looking up and expected to see her fly through the rigging. That's how loud she was.
Wow.
So, and I was at W9 DXCC, well, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or more, but giving a presentation on this. So I asked him a rhetorical question, and any listeners out here, uh, feel free to email me. My QRZ address is fine, NY0V at ARRL.net. So here you go. Here's the scenario. Uh, it's 2.5 hours after sunrise, right? Her last transmission. She's on 3105. She's flying at 1,000 feet, and her antenna is a roughly 6 foot piece of wire going up to the V, because the V part of that is just a capacitive top hat at 3105. So it's just the vertical feed line. So roughly vertical. So here you are. let's just say 80 meters. We know our transmitter is a 50-watt transmitter. I'm not allowed to tell you the ERP. We spent a lot of time figuring that out. But 50-watt transmitter, AM voice, 1,000 feet, 2.5 hours after sunrise. How far do you think she was away from you? You know, you're listening on a sloper
Yeah.
on a
Wow.
ship. Okay. And I asked that rhetorically, and guys emailed me. I had a list of people that said, I think it'd be about like this or that, or, and all I'm allowed to say is that she was within 100 nautical miles of help on her last transmission,
Really.
within 100 miles.
See,
That's all I'm allowed to say.
even that I thought would have been a long. I'd have been guessing more 25 or 30 miles on 80 meters with that kind of antenna at that time of day, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would have been my email to you. But
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the other thing that I was thinking about was, I mean, how do you even know when you find her after this long a time? And it didn't occur to me that if let's say they were able to put it down in the water, but we're talking about what, 18, 19, 20,000 feet of water.
Yeah.
If it
5,400
settles,
meters. Hmm.
okay, so if it settles to the bottom after some period of time, there is no wave motion down there. So,
Nope.
and so it's not like it's going to corrode a lot, and it's
Nope.
not going to get covered by sand. Is that right?
You are correct. Yes.
So what you
Most people
could,
don't understand surface currents are just that. They're only on the surface. There's surface currents, and there is a 1 knot current going west. Because I threw a bottle in the water on our way home on the first expedition. I got an answer back from a guy in Bayang Island north of Tarawa. So
Huh.
that's a whole nother story, guys.
Yeah.
wow,
With this
wow,
native,
That's another podcast, right,
that's
Tom?
another podcast right
wow.
there. I've got all the newspaper clippings and everything, and all the letters. But
So
uh,
your
but
submergible vehicles that you talked about earlier, Tom, and I've seen some shows on different ones.
mhm.
Uh, those might be able to go down and check the
They
bottom.
do go down. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's no might about it. Those are they're autonomous.
Yeah.
And the way that works is you still got to triangulate to know where you are underwater. You don't have GPS
Yeah.
until you're on the surface.
Yeah,
So we have these transponders, and you put down these transponders, and they have a weight on them and also a glass ball float. So that holds them about 100 meters off the floor. And you've got two of those, and you drive the ship over those, and you have an acoustic modem, and you find exactly where those are. And then you program the AUV as your third. It has a Kalman filter in it, and you send it down 18,000 feet, and it starts. Once you let go of a weight, and it goes off, and we call it mowing the lawn, but it's just like out here in the Midwest, right, Joe? You got corn, you're going to
Yeah, buddy.
cultivate that field. You're just going to go back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And when it's done, the batteries are getting low. It drives up to the surface and then phones home on where it is and satellite and calls the ship, and then we go and pick it up and charge the batteries and download the data
Sure.
wow.
and look at the sonar data.
So
So you've
so
got an aircraft, Bill. Just to answer your question, though, it's an aluminum aircraft. It's heavy duty. It's got a I-beam across the wing root, and uh, it could have broken up if she screwed up and put it in and break a wing off. But, we think that airplane is going to be whole, pretty much like that C-45 that went in and out like Ontario. Yeah, it'll have damage, of course, but
sure,
when it gets down there, it's 18,000 feet. There's no oxygen, no sunlight, there's no currents. And Elgin Long, I saw a video once where Elgin was interviewed, and he says that airplane's going to look like it just went down. A little dust on it, but when the dust. I've got a little jar here of the we picked up off the bottom of the ocean. I've got it here. A little, you shake it, and then it just
Yeah.
settles back
really,
down.
Yeah.
But and then we've got these other. I don't know if you've seen these or not, but
no,
oh,
No.
okay. Well, let's see if I can. Yeah,
yeah,
let me take it out. The pressure down there is 8,000 psi.
holy smokes,
So we would take an 8-ounce cup and we would write on it, and then we would send it down in a tube that had holes in it. And you can see this is from 2002,
Yeah,
and I wrote my name on it and
yeah.
Amelia and that kind of thing. Rockwell Collins, because they sponsored us. And some of them, I have a couple with my call, of course. But so anyway, it comes back the size of a thimble. This used to be an 8-ounce cup. So
Oh
it
my God.
shrinks the
Really?
polystyrene, the styrofoam, to all the air comes out of it, but it remains its shape and the lettering remains perfect on there. Well, as much as my handwriting is, of course.
I'll be darned.
So that's what 8,000 pounds per square inch does to an 8-ounce cup.
So
So,
the big question is, Tom, will the mystery be solved?
well, I think it is solved. But yeah, I mean, it's out there, it's out
So
there.
yes,
It
it's
is out there. It was a big problem to begin with, impossible problem. And by golly, 26 years from now, with testing and verification using system engineering, we call it engineering CSI, because you take the data, you follow the data where it leads you. You don't make an assumption and then say, well, this could be it, or find the data that matches your assumption.
yeah.
You come up with the data and you follow the data to the truth, right? So it's out there. Yes, it's expensive. It's time and money. If I go out the next time, if we raise the money, it'll be 3 months of my life out there. And my wife is going to have to figure out how she's going to mow the lawn and pay the bills, right? I
Ha!
mean,
Everybody's got problems, right?
yeah. Well, but one of the cool things we do, and you can go to Nautico's website, and there's an expedition portal, and you can see every time Rod and I set it up with the space station to work the space station. And so we talked to Kenneth Ransom down there, and I don't know if he's still there now. It's been a while since our last expedition. But so he gets with the astronauts. They find out where their free time is, and if they could show up at certain orbits, we work out their orbital plan, and then one of us holds a 3-element Yagi
Yeah.
and with the charts and a watch, and the others on the radio. And we have contacted for all 3 expeditions so far the space station, and that is a remarkable thing when you put those crewmen who operate those ships on that mic. Uh, it's just unbelievable. So we get on with first one was Commander Bill MacArthur in 2002, and we have a Polish seaman there. And so I get on there and I say, "Hey, Bill, is Valerie there? The Russian RA0, right? ISS." He goes, "Yeah, he's only about 10 feet away from me." I go, "Would you mind putting him on?" "Oh, no, no problem." So I do, and then I get this Polish guy on there, and he's like really nervous, and he's talking then with this Russian cosmonaut, right? And so he's, hey, exchanging names, and they're speaking Russian. And he gets off, and after that episode, he goes, "Never in my wildest imagination would I ever believe that a poor Polish seaman could be talking to a Russian cosmonaut." You know,
Yeah, right.
Unbelievable. And that happened every time there was something going on there. The last time we had 2 engineers on board from Ukraine, and the person was Sergey on the space station, and one of we had a Sergey, one of the Ukrainians, and they spoke Russian back and forth. Now this is before
Yeah,
it
sure.
blew off, but anyway, our hearts are really with these 2 guys because we don't know what's happened to them,
Sure.
in Ukraine. But then the last one we got on there, and it was International Women's Day, and Peggy Whitson from Iowa. Peggy Whitson was on there. She was actually going to have to stay till September and break the record for women in space. And it was International Women's Day. And so we took the 4 women that we had on board, a doctor, a journalist, a NASA Goddard Space Center person, and the doctor. Did I say that? Doctor, journalist. Oh, and a sonar expert.
Oh,
So,
So we had four women on board, and so we had Shane. Shane was his first name. Good Irish name.
yeah,
Anyway, he was Army, and we had one guy on board from the Army, and he says, "Go Army, beat Navy," that kind of thing. And then they get off, and then we start putting the four women on board, and each woman each gal on there had come up with a question and asked Peggy Whitson these questions. And here we are, group of four women doing deep sea research and work, if you will, and she's up there doing space research, and
mhm,
they're women. And talk about what's the legacy of Amelia Earhart and the
yeah.
99ers, the women in aviation.
yeah.
There it is. There it
Wow.
is. So anyway, you can see those videos up there. Um, anyway, it's just really, and they just love that, of course. It's
Yeah,
Sure.
really good camaraderie with the team and everything.
yeah, sure.
So
So,
you mentioned a book, I think that you said does it capture the majority of what you've been talking about, or is it about something different or
well, Dave Jordan wrote a book, Never Forgotten, and
Never.
that's you can probably get it on his website, the Nauticos website, I think. I've had it for
yeah.
so long that Elgin Long wrote the book that really got us all going, and it's called Amelia Earhart Mystery Solved. There you go, Mystery Solved. Uh,
Yeah,
excuse me. He wrote it from an aviator, navigator uh, position. It's not like a
Okay.
biography or anything like that. So he came up with an original navigation error of like 6,000 square miles that it had to be within that block. And all we've been doing the whole time then is how do we narrow that down? How do we get down? We've done over 3,000 square miles now with another group that went out in '08. And so with all that, we've covered an area the size of Connecticut
Wow.
in detail. But it's just fabulous, guys. I mean, you're out there and there's nothing else out there but ham radio and ISS. But you're busy. But it's also you're seeing some geology and things down there that no other human being has ever seen. We know more about the moon than we do the bottom of the ocean.
yes,
Wow.
And so the geologists love us.
yeah,
But seeing some of these formations, volcano, calderas, ridge lines, underground cables, you
yeah.
know, you find some things down there, but mostly just nothing. Yeah.
Wow. So has the I assume I know the answer, but has the technology increased so much that the next time out you'll be able to get much more accurate representation of the ocean bottom, or is it still going to be kind of like what you were doing in '08? Not that that was bad, but I'm
Or
curious
'06.
if that
Yeah. No.
technology's evolved.
Oh, no. Yeah. Technology is just like, well, in 2002, what were we running for our computers, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so let's put it this way. We, in 2002, we could ping off a square meter at 1,000 meters.
Okay.
Okay. So you're pinging out, you ping out each side 1,000 meters each side, and you try to overlap 10 to 20% because you don't want any voids.
Right.
Yeah.
And so 1,000 meters and get a square meter, you could get a ping off of an aluminum aircraft, and those engines and all would just be, really singing. But anyway, so now with synthetic aperture sonar and the computer's analysis that you have and 3D imaging and all this stuff, uh, it's more like 10 centimeters instead of a meter. So it's an order of magnitude better. That doesn't mean we missed something back then. I mean,
Right.
we thoroughly that Nauticus is always very careful to make sure that what they're going over, they don't have to go over again,
Hmm.
right? Because then you really screwed up.
Yeah.
You don't want any voids because a void in a lane could mean 10,000 Electras could fit in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, anyways, so they're always very careful about that. And so just because the technology was a square meter at 1,000 meters doesn't mean that now you don't really know. We
Wow.
know where it isn't. In fact, that's a very key thing in our reports because if you take any given area and you know it's not in there, that increases the probability in other areas. And you can prove that very simply, mathematically. You can show it. Um, but anyway, that's the way it works. So there's this Bayesian theorem that we use. And what we do is okay, here's the most likely areas that we've got now. And now we take in and we crank in the areas already searched. And it propagates highest probability areas so you can get a color scheme of where do you go next.
So
So
I,
yeah.
I don't want to ask this question, but it did come to my mind was,
Hmm.
so let's say you go out next year and you map that final segment that that you have to map and you find nothing.
Yeah.
So then do you guys go back and say, okay, we really believe that this was right and we either missed it or maybe the thing hit and exploded in some tiny, which I don't know how it could, I'm just making this up.
Right.
Or there's something in this whole chain of evidence somewhere else that we missed and I don't want to jinx
Yeah.
anything. I feel bad even
Yeah. Yeah.
asking
Yeah.
it, but
No, well, it's a valid question, what do you do next? And I mean, that's what we've been doing each time. You want to hone it down and figure out, okay, are we missing anything? What piece of data is out there that we don't have? And by golly, you end up finding some more things out and
Sure.
change that thing changes. And it depends on who knows. I mean, if we cover that whole area, the biggest thing that uh, we are still working on is float time. And how long would that airplane float? Now we know one floated for 8 minutes and sank. And most of us are all now pretty convinced that it wouldn't float a very long time. It would be under that surface current and be going down. And it would take 3 hours to get down. But
really,
yeah,
Really?
oh yeah. But no,
Huh.
planes don't fly underwater really. They just kind of it'll,
Well,
it'll
well,
just
and you have
sink
to
those big
remember,
heavy engines.
Tom, the motors were not running.
The motors aren't running. You
three
still have an
hours.
airfoil, but they're very, very heavy engines, and we think it may turn a little bit, but it's
Sure.
not going to go, flying underwater or
No.
anything.
Yeah, yeah.
So, our current thinking is, even if it's, you know, 8, 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, I'm just throwing those out.
Sure.
And when you're not going to be more than 24 away, 24 miles. And so we've covered a lot of the western
Okay.
area. You can find that out anywhere, but that's all been pretty much covered. Alpha floated for a week.
No.
Yeah.
No.
We don't think it did, but we've been doing analysis on that and uh, even doing glug glug tests in swimming pools. I
And
mean,
that's the official name, right?
with the right valves, with the right stems that go to the fuel tanks and stuff, and vent valves, and you put the underwater, and it goes glug 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 glug. So we call it our glug glug. How long does it take? But then figuring out the buoyancy of the aircraft, the actual volume, and Archimedes, and all that, and figuring out what that would take. That's the question, I guess. If we don't find it, I don't know. We haven't really discussed that because it's not even in our radar
And
that we're
I
not going to
wouldn't
find
either.
it.
Yeah,
We believe we're going to find it. One of
sure.
the things that's interesting is that you remember the USS Indianapolis?
Sure. With the delivered the atomic bomb and then was
You
sunk.
bet.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then it got torpedoed,
right.
right? And the captain actually got court-martialed, and he's just been recently exonerated because a student in a high school got it with the Senate and what have you, and said, hey, he was not that was not right to court martial him. So,
Huh.
um, but
Wow.
anyway, uh, yeah, they had the Japanese submarine commander actually, vouch that there's no way he would have gotten away. He was done because they were waiting for him to come in. But anyway, USS Indianapolis, Paul Allen has a search ship. He's been finding a lot of these World War II.
Paul Allen of Microsoft fame,
Yep,
or
yep.
okay,
He's dead now, but
yeah.
yeah, but his ship that does the sonar work is still there. So they decided to go out and find it in Indianapolis, and they had pretty good data about that. It's an American cruiser. They knew what they were looking for and what have you. And how many expeditions do you think it took for them to find that cruiser?
I couldn't guess. Four? Oh, wow.
4 expeditions.
And that was
So
for a cruiser that,
that's a cruiser. This aircraft is a 55-foot wingspan. It could fit on the bow of that cruiser.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a tough problem. We're not negating, how hard the problem is,
sure.
but it's a doable, findable object on the bottom of the ocean. It's doable. And I think over the 26 years we've done the research and the data collection and the tests and the verifications that, okay, we can narrow this thing down. I think with the data we have, we can find her.
Wow.
Well, I
So,
hope
but
so.
if you know anybody that wants to contribute $8 million, that's more than Bouvet, I know. So Peter One and Bouvet.
Well,
Yes.
I need to go back though. I'm a little offended because Joe and I have been working on a breweries on the air, and the Glug Glug was going to be our nickname for it. So,
Oh, yeah, sure. That's
so
good.
there's one
We
story
haven't
that
trademarked it.
no, we haven't. One
No,
story
we
I'd like
haven't.
you to tell, and then I'll let you go. Because I've not been on. I've been on a cruise in the Caribbean, but I haven't been out on the big water like you guys have and stuff. And you had I guess, a sonar device that you were trailing, like
Yeah.
20,000 feet of cable, and the engine, the motor quit, and the actual weight of the cable and the device itself pulled the boat backwards, which
Yes.
I thought that was fascinating. I don't know why. It just struck me like, holy smokes.
Well, it's also very dangerous.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're out on the ship, the Mount Mitchell, and the hydraulic pump motor blew itself apart. And I got a piece of that in my piece of shrapnel. But anyway, this hydraulic there was hydraulic fluid everywhere on the deck, and we're throwing out these, I call them diapers, but
Yeah.
anyway, because it was very slippery,
Yeah.
but yeah, you got 10,000 meters of cable, and it weighs, tons and tons and tons. And the sled then, when that broke, the winch went out. The drum, it's kind of like your fishing reel where it goes back and forth. One of those old
Hmm.
Yeah.
kind of
Old bait
reels.
casting reel. Yeah.
Yep, yep. It's like that. It's a level wind and it's a tensioner for that cable, and that cable is heavy steel. All your fiber optics and voltages go down at 400 volts and what have you. Anyway, so it's very heavy. It all of a sudden it's out. They get the thing stopped, which was also a tremendous effort by one of the crewmen to get that stopped. And then it laid down the sled on the bottom of the ocean. And as that cable laid down,
The
it
boat.
pulled the ship backwards a mile.
That's
Really?
crazy.
Because you tow it, when you have a towed system like that, it's 3 miles behind the ship and 3 miles down. So that's a lot of weight, and that ship was just going backwards, all the way. And so we were stuck. We were anchored in 18,000 feet of water. And now here's the cool story is that Jeff Palshuk and Rod Bloxham, Jeff's not a ham, but Rod, Kansas City farm, Western Kansas farm boy. And they get in there and they get the pump motor and they start taking it apart and they sequentially start taking it apart because they didn't know anything about this pump motor. And they got in there and they cleaned it all out, got all the shrapnel out and everything. And then they went back to start putting it back together again, piece by piece. They got it back together and it didn't work.
What
That
the
kind of
hell?
thing. And they pull it out and they realized that they had flipped over that one last gear part in there and they flipped it back over, put it together. And then the next thing was to take it out there. And we were chamois. We used chamois cloths to filter all that hydraulic fluid because we're running low. to get all the particles out and then run it back through that hydraulic pump.
Oh my gosh.
So that hydraulic pump unit, the HPU blew. We didn't have any spares.
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. But so then they started it up the next morning. It took all night long, where everybody was all night. And they started it up very, very, very slowly, beginning to release tension off that winch and bring it up. And I don't know how 3-4 hours to get that thing up, but it worked.
Gee.
So Rod and this Jeff Palchuk were the heroes of that, because that would have been cutting the cable and leaving over $1 million on the bottom of the ocean.
Gee.
So that's just something always happens, I mean, these are adventures. Just like Joe said, someone cuts their leg and they've been
Yeah.
on a Kumanen or, all these things. We had 2 crewmen that got sick from Palau, and they were twins and they got sick, and we had to get them out of there. And what was bad is we went into Tarawa. They, the insurance company insisted that go to a hospital. And that was the closest one, Tarawa. They get in there and Rod's taking pictures of everything. I mean, there's dogs running around. There's a TB ward with the doors open. There's syringes and rubber tubing in the sand outside. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was a metal rack basically for a bed and with a pad on it. And we had better help. I mean, we had a better facilities on the ship, you know. So that's why they had to air flight somebody. And
Wow.
Yeah.
So there was a time though, and maybe it was a different story, but there was a time where you got to go back and take a look at the bottom of the ocean where that cable had been laying. Is that correct? And
yes, that's correct.
what did you find?
So, well, you've done your homework, Bill.
I've
I'm
done my
really
homework.
impressed.
Hey,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So here we are on another expedition, and it's like 4 years later. 4 years. This corroborates what you said about the sediment.
that's why I was coming back to it.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
So this cable laid down in basically the bottom, and then when the sled came up, it just yanked it up, yanked up, and off it went. So 4 years later, we're going by and we're pinging out, and we see this line going across the screen. Well, what's that? Well, then we figured it out. It's the scar that the cable made 4 years earlier,
Gee.
just from laying down. So, that's what in my own mind convinced me that if we have that airplane pinging, we're going to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, there won't be any,
Any
big
doubts
questions.
about
Yeah, I won't guess that aluminum is going to go boing, bing, bing,
Yeah.
bing, pinging off it. Especially now, we'll get more pings. Friendship 7, when they went after Friendship 7, you know how many pixels they had on that? 1.
Really?
Yep, it was just a dot out there, right near the outskirts of their search area. And that was Friendship 7.
Wow.
Gee.
That absolutely amazing. Well, Tom, I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Oh, well,
Yes.
good. Yeah, I
Yes.
have too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think we could go on for another hour or two, but Joe's got to get his sleep because he's got to get up for Gray Line. That's his rule.
I do go
Oh,
to bed. Yeah, I'm a big gray line guy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so he'll
Those are hard bands, man. I tell you that. But I love the Gray Line, of course. Just like the old song, those got the ham band from Netherlands that they're up on the tower and they're in the tuxedo with the top hats and they're hanging on the tower singing on the early morning Gray Line and the
Yeah.
I don't
tower's
know that.
swaying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
remember
have
that?
one monitor up here, big
I got
monitor
to look
that's
that
nothing
up.
but the gray line.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a classic. These
Yeah.
guys are singing. They're
Yeah.
standing on the tower. It doesn't look like they're hooked up, but they are.
Yeah.
But there's no way I'd be up there swinging along singing a song. But on the early morning Gray Line.
Yeah.
But it's a classic.
I'll have to, and I've got for those listening and watching, I've got a whole bunch of stuff to go in the show notes, including a few different articles. The one about the freckle cream because it's worth looking at these alternatives.
Yeah.
But I don't know if your checkbook is handy, but I did go out and I looked up a Western Electric 13C and eBay popped up, and you can get free shipping, Tom, if you order tonight. It's a Western Electric 13C in working condition. What do you think he wants for it?
I don't know if it's a real one.
Well, that I don't know,
What
but
is it, a light bulb?
no, it's a
Is
it's
it a
got all the
transmitter?
yeah. Let me click on it.
Maybe it's Rod selling it.
Western Electric. Western Electric. Here's what it says. Western Electric, 13C tube amplifier using a 205D vacuum tube from the mid 20s. Beautiful case, lots of knobs and dials. $8,800.
Oh, well,
Tom, you could have that.
Yeah,
yeah, there you go. Nothing
And-
compared to the 8 million we're looking for.
So if we have somebody who's watching or listening and they say, I'm so interested in this, I'd either like to keep in touch or I'd like to make a donation or both. Is there a way they can do that?
Oh, well, of course, right?
Well,
Yeah, can contact Nauticos, Nauticos LLC. It's nauticos.com.
okay.
And Dave Jordan is the president. Jeff Morris is now running the project for the next expedition. That's his son-in-law, actually. He's a sonar expert. That's what he does for a living. But yeah, definitely can contact us. Uh, if there's really any question, get a hold of me and we'll put them together. You know,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm on
this
the
doesn't, yeah, this, yeah, it doesn't mean someone has to have 8 million in the,
but if they
Alan
did,
Eustace was our last expedition was funded by Alan Eustace, who was brought up in a balloon to 136,000 feet and let go. And he broke
uh,
the sound barrier with his body.
Gee.
But anyway, yeah, he used to be a Google executive, but he's working on other projects now. He'll participate, but not full amount, of course. And
right,
so,
right.
it doesn't matter amounts of money really. Just we have enough, we'll go. That's
All
Yeah.
right.
get 8
Well,
million bucks.
I'll have a link, and there's a big button that says support the mission, and then there's some video of that plane flying, etc. So I'm gonna have to spend some time on this. Really, really cool.
Yeah. This has been
Yeah.
so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't really
Just
talk
watch
a lot
this.
about DX. I mean, we got to talk about more DX.
Well, what are you doing next week at this
Yeah,
time?
Yeah, right.
we can do it
Yeah.
again, Tom.
Well, you know what he wants help with, Joe, is I listened to the podcast with Eric. He needs help with beverage. He's got a lot of trees and he's got a lot
Yeah.
of deer.
Tom,
Yeah.
oh, we got to get him some. Do you have beverages up, Tom?
No, I'm using a loop on grounds.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and it's amazing what you can hear with a loop on the ground. You think, golly, it's just a, you know, 17 by 17 by 17,
Yeah.
diamond on the ground is like, I'm hearing things all over the place with this thing.
I
I
like
had a
I like my beverage, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam.
Oh yeah, 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 that beverage.
so he did come
Uh,
up and we put a couple beverages up here.
yeah.
Mhm.
And the one of them, it turns out, was laying on the ground and was covered in water from the ice and snow. And I think
Mm.
that explained why all the signals coming over the polar sounded so watery, but I haven't confirmed
Yeah,
it.
that's it. That has to be it.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, for
No,
mine, I'm gonna have to, for the timber that I have, I'll have to be up above the deer, on insulators all the way, in some way kind of a straight line out. So it's not an easy problem when you're got a forest.
but it's not impossible. I learned that
Not
today.
impossible.
So
Yeah.
I know
So Tom,
Joe and Dave Anderson, K4SV, about every
Mhm.
20 feet, they'll use a wire nut. And if the
Mm.
deer hits it, that's where it'll part, and you just got to put it
Uh,
back together.
yeah,
so my beverage,
that works good.
Tom, is 4 foot high,
Yep.
and
He's got a lot of deer.
I feed the deer. I feed the deer, and they're 4 foot high on a
The
rebar.
deer are 4 foot high?
No, the beverage. But I've got a 4 foot piece of 1/2 inch rebar, and I've got a 1/2 inch PVC and a T on top with a
Hmm.
slit in it for the cable. Nothing is glued together. And my wire runs across there. Most of them are like 500 feet. And
Hmm.
we watch the deer. They either go under the cable or they jump over it.
Hmm.
And knock on wood, I've never had a deer take it down. and
Yeah,
I have
you're
them up.
lucky.
Yeah, one is up all the time, and the other three I put up because they're in a cornfield.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
always
that's the way a
think of
lot of guys do it around, you have a farmer that allow you to put it out in the field, and that's great.
yeah,
I always think of what Ralph Bellis, K9ZO, told us. He doesn't understand why they have to put the flags on the guy wires on these islands. He said, "How many birds have you seen lying dead in the yard because they flew into the guy wire on a power pole?" You
yeah,
know.
or a tree.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, a
absolutely.
requirement's a requirement, but I get it.
Yeah,
Oh
So,
birds are
yeah.
pretty smart.
Tom, it's been absolutely a
Well,
pleasure. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And at any time
Yes,
you get a whiff of something new and you want to share it, we'd love to have you come back.
yeah,
And honestly, I'm probably going to put a reminder here, and I'll get a hold of you about a year from now if I don't see you before then, and we'll see what you're up to and what the latest
yeah.
is. And boy, we'd enjoy the heck out of that. Yeah, we've been talking
Well,
about your station or your accomplishments and stuff, and we
we'll
should do
send you
that.
our phone numbers, and if you find that airplane, you call us first.
yeah, right.
And,
Like that's going to happen.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole another issue,
Yeah,
of how do you release the information and how do you keep it quiet? And
yeah.
what we don't want, there's people around the world that would try to get something off that airplane.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sure.
You
okay.
know,
I
it's like the two Mir submersibles went to the Titanic and they're picking up artifacts. I mean,
Really?
people who have money.
Yep.
So that whole thing has been very much discussed and of how you release and how do you keep it quiet and all that
okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
But we're having weekly meetings, and I would say keep your ear to the ground. There'll probably be some information coming out in the next month or so.
Okay.
Oh, great.
I was going to ask you, and I never want to ask something that may not be appropriate, but you had said about the she may not have heard the dip, and we can't really go into details, and I don't want the details, but I'm curious, like, why are there things about this since it's darn near 100 years old that you don't want to share? But it's not a military issue. It's simply if people get too much information, they connect the dots. All of a sudden, it's a circus. Maybe they destroy it if they're trying to get it recovered or whatever. So, um,
No, well, yeah, I don't know what you're driving at there really, but
no, what
I
I'm
mean,
suggesting, maybe you can't give, maybe you guys aren't allowed to give out all the details because you don't want someone else connecting the dots and getting there first, perhaps. I don't know.
well, of course, yeah, we're under NDA, and the data I mean, both dynamic aviation and Nauticos, and all of us spend our time to pull that data. And that is very valuable data, and it's new data. So we've used a bunch of old radios with some new test equipment and a bunch of old guys, and we came up with some new data.
Yeah, yeah,
That's basically what it is.
that's what it is. Okay.
I was 47 when we started this project.
Wow.
Really?
So yeah, so I'm 73 now, but yeah,
Gee.
we want to get out there and get this thing done.
Yeah. There's an author, Clive Cussler, and I used
Oh
to
yeah.
read, and he has some sort of a foundation that the proceeds from his book go to fund him, and he goes out and looks for, Roman wrecks and those kinds of things in the Mediterranean stuff. So he's using the funds for that, which I always thought was really
Hmm.
cool. But this
Mm,
is really cool. So my
yeah.
hat's off to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's fun. And Nautico's actually found an ancient shipwreck with all the amphora is still in it.
Wow.
And
Really?
yeah, but they haven't got the Greek government to want to fess up any money to go get it or look at it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so they know where it is.
Huh.
Wow.
Anyway,
Well, with
Well,
that, I'll let you
okay.
go. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah.
well,
much.
73 guys, it's been a
It,
pleasure and glad we could talk. And if we can talk more DX and mentoring new DXers, that would be awesome.
Well, we'll set that up for a couple of months because I'm trying to do that. Is to get I've got a list of 5 or 6 DXers that have emailed me saying I have questions about this and this and this,
Mhm.
and I thought I'd get some experienced DXers along with us to get on with them. So I'll add you to the list, and as soon as I can pull that together, we'll make it work.
The best
Great.
of luck to all your research guys, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And
We'll
and a, and
appreciate it.
a
So,
big kudos to your wife because she's clearly been there for you to do this for 26 years. And
yes, and also a kudos to Rockwell Collins. It's now Collins Aerospace, but they sent us out twice, and Rod and I did not have to use our vacation.
Wow.
They gave our labor as an in-kind donation to Seaward because we are doing STEM education. Like when we're on board, we're talking to classrooms live, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So anyway, the executive vice president of HR said, "Hey, yeah, we'll support you in this." And so we did not even have to spend our vacation to go out there for 12 weeks.
That's
Yeah.
terrific.
Well, good for
So
him.
Wow.
so Collins Aerospace was really in there, but of course now they're not. They're Collins Aerospace, but now they're Raytheon Technologies, RTX. So it's a whole
Yeah.
nother deal now. I don't even know who the head of HR is, and they'd say, "Who are you?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Back
So
then they knew who I was, right?
Yeah.
the year I supported Rockwell Collins over in Cedar Rapids, the one thing I remember was coming out of the hotel every morning, and the car would be coated with this fine dust from the General Mills plant that I
Oh,
parked
really?
next to in the Cheerio dust. Yeah. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What
yeah.
year were you there?
It would have been, oh my gosh, 94 through, well, I'll tell you when it was. No, it was the 20th year of it was 89 because I was there when they celebrated the 20 years of the lunar landing.
Ah,
Oh,
okay.
So yeah, that's when it would have been probably 89 and 90, something like
Oh,
that. And a very impressive company. I know that. So,
oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I was on Milstar at the time. That was a military satellite program.
okay.
So,
Wow. All
yeah.
right, we better stop or we're going to start the clock again.
We
So,
keep
Yeah.
going on here. Yep.
But
Yep.
okay,
Well,
Tom. Well, thank you
okay,
so much.
see you on 6 meters sometimes there, Joe.
I'm there every day.
Every
Yeah,
day
me
he is.
too.
So.
I'm looking for those grids for FFMA.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well,
See ya.
thanks, guys. Have a good evening. Be
Uh-huh.
Okay,
safe.
Good
take care.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wasn't that great?
Gee,
Huh?
send me a link of that radio. Of course, this is beyond me. That that radio for
Yeah,
$8,800.
I'll do. Okay. I got it up right now. I'll send it to
Yeah.
you.
Um,
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I can remember though, at this dinner I went to, I'm sitting there talking to him and he's starting to tell me all this stuff. And Scott's trying to he's going to get up and start talking. And we're just going. And I'm
Yeah.
asking questions and and finally it was like, it's like, oh my goodness, I better be quiet.
It is just unbelievable. The group, to me, it is. To the group, most of them are all hams and all engineers and all high educated people in their field. And then they put this all together. And this didn't happen in a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. They've been working on this for years.
I know.
Yeah, and so he's been down in this submergible, correct?
No, I don't think he's been down in it. I'm going to send you a link right now.
Okay,
You should get that.
I'll open it up when we're gone.
Yeah.
But okay, you don't think he's been down in a submergible?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that thing was so far down, but I read that and it's like the cable was so heavy and so deep that it pulled the
Hold
ship
the boat.
backwards. And I thought, well, what would have kept it from pulling the winch right off its moorings, you know?
Yeah, I'm
Hey, I'll,
surprised.
I'll tell you, I really like our club, but this Twin Cities DX club, I'll tell you, you got him and you got Glenn Johnson and you got Scott Wright
Yeah,
and that AC0W. And I mean, and I'll bet if I sent you the roster, you know over a third of them.
yeah,
And they're all like him. They just talk DX and they talk about hell. They're all active as hell. And
yeah,
um,
yeah. Minnesota Mike, VTT.
yeah, see, there's one I forgot.
Yeah,
Hey, I got an idea for you, and then I'll let you go. I gave a talk last week. And I was surprised. I didn't know he was going to be in it, but Ned Stearns is DX Club, the Arizona Outlaws.
yeah,
So I gave a talk to them about chasing DX during a contest. And I sat in on the meeting before my presentation, and they do something really cool. And I've sent him an email about it. They have a club contest. So what they do is they take a chart, and for every D expedition that the club approves, they put it on the left-hand column, and across the right-hand column is the guys who work them. So like, maybe there's 10 D expeditions and you've worked all 10 of them. So you get 10 check marks, and at the bottom of the year, your count would be 10. Maybe I worked 9 of them, so I get 9. but the top two guys get a year's dues in the club.
Huh.
So not a big deal, but it's something to kind of keep. And then they post it out on their website. So at any time you can go out and say, oh boy, I really need this one coming up, or I need. So I'm trying to think if that would help. It won't, but
Well, you're probably right, but I've always been an advocate. I'll try anything once. If it don't
well,
work, it don't work.
no, you taught me that pretty darn well.
Yeah, yeah, because we can sit here and bullshit about this all night, and at the end of the night, we won't know if it would work or not.
I think on your tombstone in 30 years, you need two things. And one is if you don't ask, you won't know. And the second one is the ass you kick today may be the one you have to kiss tomorrow.
No. Yeah, you're right.
All right, well, go ahead and click that link because as soon as I close the meeting, it's going to go away.
Oh, okay. Let me get over here. Hang on.
Boy, that was interesting.
Yeah. Oh my God. That guy was really good. Hang on. I'm trying. I got so much shit open up here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, wait a minute. I gotta get out of here.
All right, take your
I gotta
time.
get in. I gotta get in the new mail.
How's your wife doing? Who?
She's who?
Who?
Uh, I don't have anything from you. That's new. I got 21 new mails. I
No,
don't
no.
have.
In the meeting, there should have been a meeting chat window that popped up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hang on.
I just sent two messages. Test, test.
Well, shit. The site can't be reached.
What bullshit? All right, I'll just send it to you in email.
Wait a minute. Yes. Yeah, send it to me in an email.
Yeah, I'll do it right now. All right, buddy.
You have to go to monastery tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we got to get to. So I did get an email back from what's this? Your bud Jason. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
he'd like to get together lunch and talk about doing the tickets next year. I said, oh, we'll make
Great.
that happen the next week or two. I don't like to drag my feet on a volunteer. So I'll look at my schedule tomorrow and shoot you a couple lunch dates and see if one works, and then
Yeah.
I'll get with you and we'll get
Oh,
with you.
hell. Yeah, that'd be great. Mindy sent us well, she brought it out. We was not home, but she left it here. The R for registration for the logo on that ICOM sign that Rob had made.
Yeah.
The one that was all lit up.
Yep.
And she says that we need to have that registered mark on there, according to Ray. Well, we looked in QST. I looked in all my manuals for ICOM, and no place is that ICOM got that registered R on.
Huh.
So I don't know why the hell he wanted it on that, but it's on there. We put it on there today.
I had not heard that, so
Yeah.
interesting. Oh,
No,
well.
no big deal. Okay, very good.
All right, buddy. I'll be in touch. Good time
Okay.
tonight.
Yep. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. I hope you found that as interesting and as enjoyable as I did. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. I would also like to thank our guests today, Tom, NY0V, and Joe, W8GEX. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur radio issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you just have a question, email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I would especially like to thank you, our listeners and viewers. Without you, there would be no reason to do this. Please drop me a line if you've achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. If you're enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to follow us to get updates on future YouTube and podcast episodes, as well as DX events and DXpeditions, join our Facebook page, The DX Mentor. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my ex-well Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pile-ups.